When was the last time you identified as human? Typically, we identify with who we are as it applies to things like our career, family dynamic, sports fandom, or the bands, movies, and books we love. Rarely have we ever felt or had the need to make the distinction between human or not. But in the age of AI, that is increasingly becoming a priority. Back in April, Tools for Humanity, a startup co-founded by OpenAI CEO Sam Altman, unveiled its solution to this problem. It's a brand called World, an identity and financial network that includes a cryptocurrency called WorldCoin and an unprecedented piece of hardware, the Orb. It's a volleyball-sized spherical device that uses a retina scan to authenticate users as human and then provides a digital verification code. So far, World has more than 27 million participants and nearly 13 million verified humans across more than 20 countries. Its goal is to verify 50 million people by the end of 2025 and eventually sign up every single human being on the planet. The company hopes the biometric verification code it creates will essentially be our digital passport to ward against fake AI-driven content and utilized for everything from online banking to dating apps. Altman told Time, if this really works, it's like a fundamental piece of infrastructure for the world. However, before that, it needs to convince us all to actually use it. On today's episode, I'm talking to John Patroulis, the Chief Marketing Officer at Tools for Humanity, and the guy tasked with convincing us all to get human verified by the World platform. But first, this is our August episode, and this month marks not only the kickoff of the English Premier League, as well as most of all the major global soccer leagues, it's also a good time to look ahead just about 10 months from now when the World Cup will land on North American soil. So I called up London-based brand consultant James Kirkham, who has worked extensively for decades in the sweet spot between brands, football, music, events, content, and more, to chat about how brands are and should be getting ready for all of it. Okay, everybody ready to scan your eyeballs? I'm Jeff Beer, and this is Brand New World. First of all, James, thanks for being here, man. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. This is a genuine pleasure.
Well, okay, so you're a consultant now, advising brands on all matter of challenges and opportunities. But I first met you years ago when you were leading Cup 90, which was a new media company covering global football from the fan perspective. That was the kind of line. And as a soccer football fan myself, it was a revelation, really. And you guys were doing live events and things around Euro 2016. You had a big push then. And really, a lot of the conversations I'm having now with brands looking ahead to 26 was a lot of the stuff you guys were talking about is an extension or a scaled up version of a lot of the stuff you guys were doing and talking about and thinking about a decade ago. And you've continued to work in that cross-section of football brands and media. Last year, of course, people can check it out on Fast Company, the launch of Cleats Club platform, which I'll ask you about later. So long rambling intro just to say that, we've had the Women's Euros final is this Sunday as we're recording. The Club World Cup just ended. The Premier League and most of the major European leagues are about to start within the next month. This is our August episode, so in August. And brands are either panicking or knee deep in their plans for next summer's World Cup, hosted, of course, by Canada, US, and Mexico. So I wanted to talk football, soccer, football, whatever. We can argue about that later. First, I'll just were you interested in the Club World Cup? What were you thinking about football this summer and how brands were hyping and engaging with it? Because I know you do pay pretty close attention to this stuff.
I do. My gosh, we've got a lot to knit together there. And for a couple of football/soccer buffs like us, yeah, you're right. Listen, as you know, I'm a Manchester United fan, so I think I was doing my best to forget soccer for a month or two, to be honest. We're not going to dwell on them today, fortunately. This summer's been strange, I think. Look, first and foremost, I'm a fan, and we're definitely going to get onto some of the previous businesses, current work, and all of that good stuff. But as a fan, I fortunately, in all the work that I currently do, I can remain 100% objective and be as critical as perhaps I am positive. And I do tend to be positive, but I look for trying to galvanize fans and bring fans together. And football is the arguably biggest common denominator on the planet. And I just can't help but feeling the Club World Cup was a tournament in search of a purpose, a reason for being. You know, if before we even switch onto thinking too much about brands and brand involvement, the biggest takeout memory is probably Trump and Infantino on stage at the end. I mean, there can't be a more sort of odd moment slash slightly concerning optic of where we're at with the modern game with that scene at the end. But, and there are lots of buts, it's a brand new tournament. My experience with tournaments, you mentioned COP90, going all the way back to 2016, you've got a great memory. Funnily enough, in 2016, we sat in the COP90 offices in London town and we were looking at 26, actually. We had a 10-year plan back then. Sort of the US-centric side of things we thought would be hugely important. That was always the aim. And listen, I still have huge respect for those guys. I think they did some lovely work with lots of brands. And I know they've been out there a lot recently, really banging that drum. And I'm sure there's some great stuff to come. But I think there's been a steely focus on publishers and platforms and brands and businesses for some time, thinking the US World Cup next year is a huge opportunity. So the Club World Cup should have been the lovely forebearer of what's to come. My overarching feeling is, well, my Chelsea friends, my fans, and you know, we did a piece of work with Chelsea recently to launch their new kit with some of their stars. So I have a lot of kind of good friends at the club as well. They were very, very happy about winning that trophy. I just think it probably took a little while for a lot of it to catch the public's imagination, certainly over here in the UK.
Cole Palmer helped.
Cole, he's just relentlessly brilliant. What he mouthed, which I'm not sure is appropriate for the podcast, where Donald Trump stood in front of him refusing to leave when he handed him over the trophy, is just textbook Cole Palmer. But plus his brilliance. And I think that's it. It was lit up by a few moments of brilliance, which any good club tournament would be. My friends sort of at Cleats Club, who are, of course, with Harry Kane, I think they all enjoyed the tournament. They loved how it went. They thought the hospitality was incredible. They said it was bloody hot at times.
And the pitches, there were complaints about the pitches too.
Yeah. So if it was a warm-up for the World Cup, it had some teething problems. But listen, I intend going out next year with my son, who will be 17, and we always had it on the calendar from when he was about 10 years old of, wouldn't that be amazing when you're 17 to go to the World Cup together? So we fully still expect to go and plan and can't wait, and it'll be wonderful. I just think that's a tournament that's going to take a while to bed in, and I'm not sure how easy that is to do in a kind of 4-year cycle, but we'll see.
There were brands like, the one that comes to mind was Michelob Ultra had another Lionel Messi ad, in which, of course, he says exactly 0 words. But as well as there were, mainstays like Visa, which are part of the World Cup every time. And I think you're right. To your point around you guys back in 2016, already looking at 26 as a moment in the U.S. and that potential. I mean, the U.S. is always, and that audience has always been, from a football perspective and brands involved in football, the white whale, right? Like, how do we unlock this? And it's been slower. It's not a huge explosion. It's been a slower, I would say, over the last 2 decades, and growing. I've read some comments where CMOs were like, "Oh, we tried to treat the Club World Cup as a bit of a preview or as a testing ground for how we engage." I didn't really see too much that for me was like, oh, these guys have it locked in for next summer. It's still very much to me up in the air of how brands, and obviously there's different perspectives here. You're in the UK. There's brands in the UK that'll be, using the World Cup in America to excite fans back home. I'm mostly talking about global brands and American-based brands that are trying to use this as a big moment for them. And I didn't really see much yet, to be honest. Like as a preview, I was like, I don't know. It kind of was just there in the background.
I completely agree with you. You would assume the brands endemic in the game, certainly ones who are contracted to be a part of this thing because they're on 8, 12, 16 longer year cycles with FIFA, full stop. You would be forgiven for thinking, well, maybe long-term planning means that they could be doing something incredible in 26, test driving it for the Club World Cup, in 25, and we could have seen that innovation, and we haven't. I think there's a whole host of other reasons why that is. My time in football, though, almost relentlessly, there are some ongoing longer-term conversations they rarely become the thing that we see. I think they start with good intent, with businesses that have the internal infrastructure and the understanding of, right, we're going to be smart about this. And you could probably guess who they are. You know, it's not like Coke don't have a great World Cup conversation going on internally right now, or the ABIs or whoever they might be. But unbelievable amount of brands come in last minute. And I'm talking 11th hour last minute.
Would you consider now last minute?
No.
Okay.
No, I mean, honestly, at Copper90, we would sit there knowing full well.
In April?
Yeah, honestly, it's frightening. I was doing a lot of work with the guys at Sport Bible about a year or so ago when, what would that be? The last World Cup, I think, Men's World Cup. And it was like a month and a half out, you're still seeing brands start for the first time. Because I guess, so here's the thing as well. This is where strangely brands and commercial and marketing does relate to fandom too, because it just doesn't catch fire. It does not get the public consciousness until very, very late. Whatever the World Cup is, wherever it might be, you know, there was the last year's sort of, if you like, in Europe here, at least, it was seen as this incredible European summer of sports. We've got the Olympics in Paris, which follows straight on. And yet still you saw stuff very last minute, because I think it aligns much more to when the imagination of the many suddenly catches fire and brands think, oh, maybe we can step on that too. I think there's also perhaps a sidebar conversation of these moments now. They're few and far between. The Olympics, the Football World Cup, you could kind of count on one hand moments that really galvanize and bring people together. But even then, it's not like the consumption experience, the sort of consumption behaviors are what they once were. Brands used to buy into this, hey, we're all watched together, we'll sit there linked armed, stand there cheering together, and it's beautiful. And for an alcohol brand, for a fizzy drink, that showing our lifestyle of being as one as a nation. But is that really the way we consume now? And I think as such, sadly, brands can afford to be later and think, I don't need to. I'm likely to spend heavily on digital. I can go much later. We are of a very fractured audience. Half of them are consuming in different places, in different time zones, in different time slots. We can do look backs, reacts. You know, back in 2016, we did a reactive kind of fan content series, The Fans Daily, where we were filming, led by a young presenter called Ellie, every day. And we had a whole bunch of creators in and around France. It was that tournament. We would compile all of their fan footage and it would go out the next morning, and it was alongside a terrestrial broadcast. And so it's kind of innovative at its time, but really now you could probably nail that pretty effectively on a TikTok or a Snapchat.
Totally.
You just need a smart bit of infrastructure, the right people, and then people find it in their own feeds. They're not following stuff in the way that they once did. It kind of comes to them. So I guess all of that to say is I think perhaps annoyingly brands can afford to act that way, which is a shame, because we're looking for the big brand moments and we want to be excited and raise our excitement levels, and it just doesn't always come to us like that.
Yeah, that makes me think of like, well, first of all, to be clear, like, I don't think that the idea of using the Club World Cup as a preview is analogous to the World Cup, because these are apples and oranges, to your point about being a new tournament, and there's just simply not the same connection or popularity, yet.
Agree.
But I like this idea of, on one hand, the last minute, the notion of being last minute as a brand into something, in terms of planning for the World Cup, feels like, oh, you fucked up. You should be already knee deep in this. But it sounds like, from what you're saying, it sounds like there's potential anyway. And I'm sure people smarter than I am are already doing this. But like, you basically have a go list of like plan A, B, C, D, E, and then see what the culture is saying as we get to April or whatever. You have that list now. You're kind of lining up potential things. And then depending on what culture's doing, where your brand is in culture at that moment, then you can sort of be like, you make that decision, but you kind of have the background or the pre-planning kind of already done. To me, that could be, I mean, obviously production logistics aside for a moment, that you could probably pull something off that's still pretty cool.
No, I think it's a great shout. It's a long time ago, and we're not talking about a reactive tweet like Oreo. But the way you describe that kind of speed of culture point, you could argue very feasibly that it would be borderline insane where we are in the world right now, the tumultuousness, the sheer unpredictability, where the brand will either be at the likelihood of the same platforms being at the forefront. I will rarely speak and consult with a brand and say, I'll be able to tell you exactly what you should be a part of in 12 months. I think that would be...
I'd be very suspicious of anyone who would say that.
Yeah, you'd be lying. So it would be insane. So I agree. I think actually almost marking off a set of almost themes or buckets or areas, which, let's be honest, should be aligned to the brand anyway. You know, are we more fan-centric? Are we more a part of sort of fan culture? No, actually, we might be more about the talent and the on-pitch. Or no, we're actually about athletes when they're off-duty, and it's not really about whatever they're doing in the 90 minutes. It's more, maybe more the old Copper 90 philosophy. Like you said, it's more everything outside the 90 that makes the 90 matter more. Or is it more like football as used as a passport to elevate travel and food and different cultures and so on and so forth? You can find those themes and buckets, as you say, but to absolutely perfectly nail it 12 months in advance and just hope it's going to land then, I think would be actually risky. I think there just needs, there's probably a middle ground. You know, we used to talk about the 100 days out. We would deliberately try and spike interest ourselves at that point and put out trails and sizzles and create interest effectively, you know, just over 3 months or whatever that works out as. But even then, it's quite rare the populace is on board. And, you know, we're going to get on to talk about it, but everyone is knee deep in their own seasons generally, and they bloody love their club football, and that is as high as sky high in terms of noise and awareness and attention and all of that sort of stuff. So it's a sudden shift and transition to, I'm interested actually, but that's like a couple of weeks. So there needs to be, I think, probably a sweet spot, a couple of months out, assuming those productions, as you say, and it's not too production heavy, then it can be achieved. And that maybe that isn't as sort of daft as it sounds.
Yeah, you know what? The other risk I see, well, not risk, because there's this balance, and obviously it's never going to go away. But you have the official major sponsors, and I'm always interested to hear what they are thinking. You know, the Coca-Colas, the ABIs, because you know Morgan Flatley, who is the CMO of McDonald's, who is the global CMO of McDonald's, years ago used this term when we were talking about earlier work that brand had so much on. She used the term cultural wallpaper. And I think a lot of sports sponsorship work, when it's not done, I would say correctly, is just a lot of money spent on logos and billboards and logo placement. And then it's all over the place. And maybe you have an ad that runs every single halftime on every single match. But the real impact, if you're actually looking to engage a football audience and maintain that, is more on the ground. And that got me thinking of, like, you write a lot and talk a lot about brands need to use creativity and scale to get us, the audience, out of the algorithm into real experiences. Those two things are obviously pretty much diametrically opposed. Like the kind of cultural wallpaper work, yes, maybe it's just table stakes if you're a giant global brand, but you need to be doing the things that differentiate, but also, to some of the stuff you've written about, is pull us out. And that's where that differentiation can be found. So say a brand I'm a CMO and I'm kind of thinking about getting a few plans together that maybe I can think about 100 days out or 2 months ahead. How do you think brands should be thinking about that as they plan and invest in their World Cup strategies? That idea, because I know you're very enthusiastic about this notion, about these going kind of micro audiences in some cases, but actually like the real experiences and brands as kind of utility in culture, if that makes any sense.
Makes a ton of sense. I would go so far as to say is the only thing really working properly right now in social is to start off social entirely, to your point. You need that real thing, that physical coming together, a sense of belonging for real people when a moment kind of happens that is really visceral or super joyful or damn right weird or whatever it might be. Now then, when people record it or document it or film it, and for a while I've called that fan fuel. Now that happens to be very authentic and natural and probably not particularly staged, but that isn't the case of, hey guys, let's plan our content calendar and 12 months of content well in advance and what platform. Like, that requires that in real life thing. And it begins like with some kind of theater, some sort of experience that is being witnessed. That could be varied. That could be some one night vinyl only drop in some corner shop by a wicked dance artist, or as has been happening recently in the Oasis gigs in Manchester in England, you know, there's a hill near the park in Heaton Park in Manchester, where people have spontaneously gathered, where they can see just the top of the big screens of the event, and they don't have tickets and they don't have wristbands, they're not a part of it. And this over a consecutive 2 or 3 nights has become hundreds and hundreds of people gathering, singing along, being together. It's a beautiful collectiveness and coming together. And that is suddenly as viral as anything that actually came out of the gig. Now, the gigs are incredible, but the point is it's a very unexpected, very spontaneous, and an absolute riposte to anything that reeks of AI mush and sea of sameness content and inverted commas what the algorithm loves. So I 100% agree on that point that I think anyone trying to do anything full stop these days to have an effect and transcend these social platforms and the algorithms needs to start elsewhere, which, as you say, is perhaps diametrically opposed. We've witnessed quite a lot across culture where there is a genuine want to escape that algorithm right now. We have become a little turned off by it, either in public discourse, political discourse, and whether it be from fallout of big tech, whether it be issues around the young. Look at the work Jonathan Haidt's done, some amazing, important work that, whether it be the impact and influence that it's having on smartphone usage in schools or social media toxicity, or wherever you end up going with that, they all are stemming from this point that we have been sort of sat in this sea of sameness with an ever beige, vanilla, ever more kind of flattening of culture going on because we've been feeding an algorithm the same stuff. And so one sense, culturally, we wanted to do something different. In the other sense, and we think it's more important anyway that we go out and be a part of real things with real people and have human connection. Now, if you take all of that loftiness away and talk about the here and now and how a brand can therefore cut through at a tournament next summer, I would guarantee right now that the majority of the ones that cut through will have that part to them. And maybe everything starts with, in the old days in agencies, we'd be calling out the experiential brief. I genuinely believe the majority of things now, to have any effect whatsoever, you need to start with the experiential brief. And when the talent are involved in that, it will have to have real people in a real place doing something real as a start point to have any effect in social media, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's interesting. I like the idea of like the football equivalent of that, the Hill in Manchester. I mean, I'm sure that in other big gigs, major artists playing in the same stadium, people have been on that hill. So like all these cities around America, it's like, why go and observe what real hardcore football fans are doing on match day around the game. And maybe you get a hint of where you can. It's not to your reference of Oreo dunk in the dark. You're kind of planning for spontaneous moments where the culture already is in all these cities.
100%, Jeff. I love that. And I don't think it's coincidental, actually, that we've suddenly landed on this without meaning to, because, Oasis, for some of the listeners, we won't really care for them, but they are a terraces band. They are a football crowd style band. I think personally, I love them, but the songs are to be sung in unison together. They represent life and death and marriages and kids and work and failure and success. And there's 30 years, 3 decades of that, but they are quite literally sung on football terraces and vice versa. And they've never hidden from that fact. And there's an incredibly clear then alignment to what you've just described. The interesting thing with it's being now classed Gallagher Hill. It's been renamed this little hill off Heaton Park in Manchester for Noel and Liam.
Nice.
But they were smart as well, Oasis. They ended up realizing this little thing was going on, and then they overnight printed off a load of kind of limited edition in Oasis font t-shirts with Gallagher Hill on them and handed them out to the people. They even then showed it on the big screens at the events. All the people who spent a lot of money actually attending the gigs are then seeing a stream for a minute or so of the people on the hill behind, and they cherished them and loved on them and elevated them. And in fact, I think one of the most recent posts, which is, again, huge numbers, is just a gorgeous montage of the people on the hill, not the event. Now, to your point, that's fan culture in its most obvious, clearest, rawest form.
I want to jump to a different subject, not totally different subject, but more specific to your work, because I do think it's super interesting. Last October, you helped launch Cleats Club, which I found it's a mobile platform. So for those who haven't heard of it, It's a mobile platform aiming to provide a close connection between sports fans and athletes without the toxicity of open social media. So it's a bit of a walled garden platform where fans can engage with both content and players themselves. The launch partner being Harry Kane, formerly of Spurs at the time, and now, of course, of Bayern Munich. As a closed wall garden, you guys really have to convince, and also the players who are on the platform, convince people to come, which is, as someone who works for a publisher, an ongoing challenge.
Listen, the way you're framing that as well is so true. And you continually find yourselves in conversations where, I mean, even right at the start when we were conceiving lots of it, we were saying, look, this is about unlearning lots of the ways we did social media. So it's quite a strange start point you would have. And often when I've been speaking with brands, media agencies through this, we're also unlearning some of the rules of the game of media, because it's not an impressions game. A brand's not going to come in and get 100 million impressions that's not it. Cleats Club is a social safe haven, full stop. Really was built, first of all, as a pure play messaging space between athletes and fans. Everything else started to then evolve around it. I guess what I mean by that is we wanted an incredibly simple, pure opportunity for you as a fan to go on board and speak with, as you say, Harry Kane, our first athlete on board, in a way that's completely unencumbered, that was without any toxicity, that was with zero trolling, that would see zero negativity, where also it didn't even have clutter. So there's a very simplistic piece of engineering. Well, I'm doing them a disservice. It's a nice piece of engineering, but it's simplistic in design in the respect that you could hit 40 messages now in the next 10 seconds to Harry, but I only see one of them if Harry's chosen to reply.
Okay.
So in other words, it's never that noisy. It's never that cluttered. Likewise, you only get alerted if Harry's replied to you or if someone else has related to your message. So that was an early actual question. I think it was from some magazine, a journalist. They said, how are you trying to keep people on the app? And I said, we're not trying to. So again, that's about unlearning it. So I think it caught them by surprise. Now we've noticed the retention rate and dwell time are huge in comparison. We've got like these sort of 5-minute sort of dwell times, which is massive, as you know, compared to social. But it's aggregated over only sort of a handful of 6-7 sessions a day. Now my son is 16. He will be on the likes of TikTok and Snap. I suspect 80, 90 sessions a day, micro sessions, micro hits. I don't think that's great. We did not design it to be an antidote to social, saying, hey, all social is bad. But that almost caught us up during both the design and creation process and when we subsequently launched. Many people jumped on board, both literally as fans, but also wrote about it, and I've loved it since, because they said, wow, this is a antidote to social toxicity. Harry himself, the first year is arguably like a test year. I'll explain, and there's a very pertinent part of the timing, actually. Whereas Harry's described it as, he says this is like those most loyal fans that he meets who've stayed an hour and a half after the match, and they're the nicest and the loveliest and the most knowledgeable, and they're all there just behind the rope, and they're sort of 20 or 30 before he gets on the coach. And he says, that's what this is like. So as an athlete, they love it. They never see anything negative, even if you and I will get to go on there now and write it, because it's actually underpinned by AI. And we've been very openly said we have no interest in damaging player athlete welfare. So they will never see anything. They'll also get shadow banned and they'll be gone. So there's a very simple kind of piece around it. The third, I guess, main pillar is we always wanted it to be the original source of truth. So again, for players and athletes online, there are unbelievable amount of either false profiles, avatars, or just mistruths, not even necessarily for nefarious dark reasons, but misquotes, you know this in the world that you're in, right?
Well, the football's like travels in gossip and hearsay, right?
It's insane. Yeah. So the nice thing with Cleats, and what we found even in the opening weeks, actually, was that you had press, from big mainstream Sky Sports and people like that, through to like the Evening Stand in London. They were saying, according to Cleats Club. So we immediately had the authorship and ownership and the original source of truth, which was always the intent. So if Harry's making a move or saying something of worth about another player, whatever it might be, it becomes that authority beyond sifting through, the internet, inverted commas. It's good timing, this question, actually, because literally, you don't know this, 48 hours ago, Apple are actually featuring it this weekend. So we're recording this, as we were saying, in July. So it's actually going to have its first, it's almost like it's a year, it's been live, but it almost feels like we've tried it for a year, and now it's fingers crossed. I think we're going to go with a bit of rocket fuel under there. We're bringing on more athletes. We're probably going to go for a variety of sports without me saying too much, but it won't just be. It looks like we don't need to just limit it to football. I think football's particularly pertinent and hot as an area for this, for players to have true fan interaction. And there's some fascinating learnings, like voice notes and audio is lovely, for example. I think it's a strangely underused part of social media. And if you go on there today and ask Harry something about his preseason Bayern training, he replies with a voice note. It's magic. It feels like getting I was going to say an autograph when we were young, but these days, of course, it's a selfie. But it's that level of resonance. And we've got tech that's built in where you can start to mint that and keep it forever. So it becomes this gorgeous little keepsake from your hero. So all of those elements are lovely. We've never thought this will be the only game in town. There are a few a bit like it. It has kind of echoes of Cameo in there in the way Harry can reply to you, but you're not scripting a reply, of course. It's genuine. You've got various parts that feel familiar, and we know full well there's superfan apps being built out by major music labels. I've seen a couple of them in beta, sort of shown to me with some of the biggest artists in the world. And my personal belief is within a couple of years, I think it will feel a little archaic and insane that we went onto this thing called social media to follow our true heroes that we cared the most about. Because why would I be cluttered or encumbered with advertising I don't want, or toxicity, or visibility on trolls, or negativity on comments, or frankly, an inability to reach them or get any level of genuinely authentic reply beyond a stage managed, manicured press shot? Why would I do that when I could probably follow my favorite pop artist or favorite footballer or best NBA star on a platform like this? I think there would be bundles of stuff, platforms, places a bit like this. But at the moment, first mover advantage and all that, it seems to be catching a lot of the right noise. We're enjoying it.
Nice. Now, correct me, because I can't remember. Are there opportunities for brands within Cleats Club? Because obviously the business model behind social is advertising. How do brands are involved or can get involved in something like this platform?
It's a brilliant question, because you're exactly right. It's almost antithetical to, hey, we're going to go on this social platform and put it here so we can get in front of as many eyeballs as possible. The very nature of a super fan community is, of course, less. We sort of flipped the model. We did an early brand partnership actually with the brand Just Eat, the delivery brand, who are also endemic in the game at the moment. They're like a tier one UEFA brand sponsor Champions League. They've got some really exciting plans actually. They did something very clever whereby they saw some of the chat that was going on within the superfan community was about stuff like food. Harry talks about nutrition. He talks about his breakfast, from fun stuff to kind of more diet, everyday stuff. So the flip of the model is to just be a part of those conversations. We, using Just Eat and a simple competition-like mechanic, we pushed and poked the community to come up with further food-based questions for Harry. Super legit, what he was doing anyway. But then Just Eat got to use those kind of content pieces and content plays on their own platforms in their wider media. So they effectively do the equivalent of a talent deal for a far more reasonable kind of budget. But they're not trying to interrupt what an audience are already interested in. They're just taking what they're already talking about. And I think there's something in that. Micro communities and small superfan communities having conversations that are relevant to the talent or the sport or the passion, whatever it might be, and brands being smart to be a part of those conversations to create culturally relevant advertising on the back of it. I don't know if we stumbled into that a bit, but I think that's an interesting model going forward that, again, makes sense to me, rather than just, hey, we're going to shout really loud, disrupt what you're doing, and come and look at me. I don't believe that's the way anymore. So it'll be very interesting to see how far we can go.
Well, James, this has been great. I do want to end on just a prediction question about this year's Premier League. I think that, I hope that Man United finish higher, just not higher than Spurs. What brands, I'll say clubs first, then brands, how do you think will have a great season this year?
My gosh, it pains me to say this. I think club-wise, if Liverpool, again, we have to keep caveating when people might listen to this.
Yeah.
If they buy Isak from Newcastle, as is the current rumour, I guess you just close up. There's no point in even watching. They've already got Florian Wirtz. They'll be on 300 and something million pounds spent. So That's a worry, I'll be honest. But I hope brands are more inventive about the feelings, the true feelings of the fans. It is not one-way traffic. The fans aren't entirely just, everything's amazing and we can't wait for more. It's not that. I'd love it if brands get involved. I was thinking, maybe I'll leave with this. I'd love it if they're more involved with the aftermath, rather than brands just planning for like the peak. What about that bit little afterwards, after the match is done, when you've lost a match and you're standing there on the terraces and you're feeling glum, then you're like archiving that little human emotion moment. I love brands to play more with the aftermath once the cameras effectively are turned back and you've gone back into the studio and into the pundits. What can brands do there when the sort of lights go on? And I think there's an interesting area there. I'd love brands to be more playful with human emotion, not just assuming it's all arms around each other's celebration, because football isn't that. And I'd love to see a lot of that little shade amongst the light. And I think you can get really playful with that.
Love that. James, thank you so much for your time. I look forward to talking to you again mid-season maybe, or catching up, because it's always interesting to hear that mix of football and brands. And of course, where can people find you?
Oh my gosh, everywhere, 20 years on.
Well, I would recommend people sign up for your LinkedIn newsletter, Inked and Iconic. James, thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Jeff.
Okay, time for a quick break. When we come back, I'll be talking to Tools for Humanity CMO John Patroulis about what exactly World is and how you create a brand around something so new, scary, unique, and aimed at every single one of us. Now it's time for the CMO Sit Down, where I talk to senior marketing leaders about a particularly compelling project or piece of work. Back in June, World marked its official US launch with the opening of World brick-and-mortar locations for people to use the orb in 6 US cities: Austin, Nashville, San Francisco, Los Angeles, Miami, and Atlanta, along with a new ad campaign to establish its own brand identity with all the humans it hopes to attract. Now, even at this early time, the consumer brands of the new AI era are emerging. Already, we have Anthropic's Claude, OpenAI's ChatGPT, Google's Gemini, Microsoft's Copilot, DeepSeek, and more. The tools and promise of our AI future is both exciting and terrifying, which is an incredibly thin tightrope for any marketer to walk. John has won just about every available advertising industry award over his career, working with major brands like Google, PlayStation, Axe, Cole Haan, and many more. My personal favorite and introduction to John is still the epic Halo Believe work for Xbox back in 2007. From a brand marketing and creative advertising perspective, John's done and seen it all. But establishing World as a trusted brand to the entire globe represents an unprecedented challenge. And that's what we're here to talk about. John, thanks so much for being here. It's always a pleasure to talk. It's been a long time. I think we first spoke maybe, I want to say like 2007 or 8.
I think that would be right, Jeff. Yes.
I'll get into my overall cynicism around this. All the AI products and brands generally, which is my bag to carry. But when I saw that John Patroulis was with Tools for Humanity and World specifically, it actually like broke down some of those walls. Where I was like, okay, I know John professionally enough to be like, and know your past work enough to be like, wow, okay, if John found this interesting enough and compelling enough and not terrifying enough to get involved in, then I have questions and it'd be really cool to talk to him about it. So I'm really happy that I cornered you in here, which is great. What is the relationship between Tools for Humanity and World, and how are they tied together and how are they different?
Okay. All of these are going to be fair questions because it can feel pretty complex. Let me try to make it as simple as I can. So Tools for Humanity is a company co-founded by Alex Blania and Sam Altman. And Tools for Humanity launched World, which is an open source protocol. So Tools for Humanity is a company that launched a protocol and is now supporting that protocol.
That makes sense. World as a protocol and brand, really, based on the work coming out. And maybe this is the wrong word to describe it, but I'll simplify it because I'm simple. What are the products of World? Because I've heard World Coin, then I hear a World, and then I see the orb. What's the product line or products that are out under the World brand name?
So I think the easiest way to kind of organize it in your head is that World is I think I'm going to enjoy this conversation, Jeff. So World is the real human network. It's what we're creating is a real human network, which in a moment where artificial intelligence is becoming more and more powerful, is going to become, we believe, very important and critical infrastructure for the internet. It's creating a network where you can ensure that who you are interacting with, whether it's through chat or through video, is human. That you are talking to an absolute human, which, as we know, is becoming harder and harder to tell. So that is what is being created, is this network of genuine, verified, real human beings. As part of that, so to verify your way in is an app, which is World App. And World App's now, I think, the third largest financial app in the world or something. Is growing at pace, 30 million users right now. You get the app, you find your nearest orb. The orb is a piece of hardware that I can go through the technology, but I know that this is a marketing audience, and I will keep it as simple as I can. That you go to this piece of hardware, it pretty much takes your picture. It uses the unique pattern of your iris to ensure that you're a unique person. And that gives you an encrypted code that sits in your phone, sits in the app itself. So you own all the data. There are no images. There's no data anywhere else that anyone could find on you. And all that has done is, again, prove that you are a unique human. Prove that it doesn't know anything, doesn't know your gender, doesn't know your age, knows nothing else except that you're a unique human. And you can use that then, frankly, just to sign in and prove that you are human on different platforms. That is the process, and that's how you join. Now, once you're in there, right now, World App, although we, again, as an open source platform, expect many different apps to be using it and have many different ways into the protocol. But right now, you'd go to World App. You've got your World ID. We have a full mini app ecosystem, and we are forming new partnerships for different ways to use it. But the one way I can almost simplify World ID is like, you know how you have CAPTCHA? Let's use that for right now. CAPTCHA, you're trying to prove you're human, we're all dealing with that. Well, that is obviously not strong enough anymore. AI can break any of those CAPTCHAs. This is an incorruptible system. Because it is incorruptible, one person can't create loads of different accounts. And it just is a very simple way. Prove you're human, knows nothing else about you. You own your data. No platform owns your data, and allows you to then interact with the real human network.
And I'll get into this from a brand perspective, but obviously this is incredibly new and unique, but to me, it feels a little like the idea where you have a credit card. It is a platform. You have the card itself. You have your number that you can buy things with your phone. You can use it in all these different places, but it's under the pick a credit card name. But the platform is that, and you have your number in this case, or your account, and you use it in all these various ways. But it feels a little similar to that in that you have this thing that you can utilize in all these different ways, but the foundation is that World human verification or authentication.
I think maybe the way that it really is like that is that it then is used, because this is open source, any platform can adapt. Okay, any platform could use this. So, for example, we've started some new, we talked about some recent partnerships. We have a partnership with Razer, who's a big gaming company. Bots are a problem in gaming. People just want to know if they're playing another human or if it's a bot. We've got a new partnership with Match Group, or through Tinder, where again, you can attest your age in there and also make sure that it's a real human that you're chatting with.
Probably important with dating.
Yeah, pretty important. Pretty important. Depends on your deal. And you can imagine this is just the beginning, I believe, and I think we believe the importance of this as we move into the future. And we talk about financial transactions, having trust that this is, at least knowing, are you interacting with a human or a bot, is going to just become more and more and more important. And trust in general is going to rely on this in the future.
It's interesting. You talk like the partnerships. I mean, for people who are kind of like, what the hell is this if you haven't heard of it? But like the partnerships in terms of the open API integration. I mean, I've also read, Minecraft, Reddit, Telegram, Shopify, Discord,
Yes.
all these platforms and places where you can absolutely see almost right away the need for, or the advantage and the desire for a human verification, particularly now. It was a problem before, but it's becoming and will be an even bigger challenge. And to your point around Match Group and Tinder, I believe you guys also have a partnership with Visa. Speaking of
Yes.
financial brands,
Yes.
given that the nature of this platform and product, for lack of a better word. First of all, World. I know it came from WorldCoin, I believe, the crypto aspect of this. It's funny when I think about that. On one hand, it feels to me both incredibly kind of vague because it could be anything, and also, I mean, it's slightly ominous, if I'm honest. What's the actual intent around that, around the name, and how it reflects, I guess, the goals of the protocol?
Yeah. So this was launched as WorldCoin a couple of years ago. And it was honestly, the intention and the ambition was always this much larger. WorldCoin plays an important role, of course, but does WorldCoin as a name hold the real human network? Does WorldCoin as a name hold the ambition and the importance of what this could possibly be? It is a very important element, but it's an element. And so it was the decision as we were growing to shift. And, if you look at these elements were already in place: WorldCoin, World App, World ID, which is the proof of human. We then launched an L2, World Chain. And so it's kind of classic brand architecture to lift up and hold what is the thing that holds the bigger vision, and that is World. Like if you were to put it on a whiteboard, you'd say, okay, these are the different verticals that exist in a classic brand structure. I can say there's nothing about this, it's classic. But if you were to look at it that way, you would say, well, World is what holds the whole thing. And actually, I think it's openness. Look, of course, I'm biased. I think it's good and I think it works. But I think its openness is part of its power. This is an open source platform. These are the protocols and tools that are in place now. That's now. This is going to grow. It's going to change. People are going to be contributing in a lot of different ways, and World can hold all of it. Whatever happens, whatever it grows to, it can hold it.
It's funny. It feels a little like inverse to kind of the traditional, as you say, there's nothing traditional about this, but the idea where it's like you have a brand and then say you had traditionally, if this was a traditional brand and product, whatever architecture, it'd be like you'd have World and then you'd have World Coin after that and then World App,
Exactly.
Everything's the this and that, but this kind of, you had these things and then got the broader brand name out of those other elements.
That's exactly it. It came authentically from the ambition and the story.
Yeah.
That's where it came from. They existed, and what were they meant to do? What is the hope and the ambition for it? And World is, I think, holds that.
It's not often that the opportunity is there to create a brand around a truly new product or technology. I mean, I was trying to think of this yesterday, like a comp of any kind. And it was kind of like, man. I mean, the iPhone is still a phone. Yes. Maybe the App Store and the iPhone together. Instagram, maybe something like that, or VR headsets, perhaps. But all of them have elements of like things that are super familiar, or there's a very distinct thread between the newness and something already familiar. I mean, to your point about CAPTCHAs and my lazy comparison to financial apps, but like there's somewhat of that, but it is so weirdly new. Tell me about the process in crafting this as an actual brand that people can engage with, trust, and work with. Because there's a lot of explaining to do.
Yes.
And that is both a marketer's dream and nightmare, I imagine. How do you start thinking about crafting a brand around this and how it engages with the world?
Man, I could talk about this forever. So I think like any brand, you try to start from an authentic place. And I can tell you, even from my first conversations with Alex and Sam and some of the founding team, it was the ambition and the sincerity of the ambition that really drew me to it. That this is an opportunity, that the world is going to change. artificial intelligence was going to become increasingly powerful, and it was going to be disruptive in many wonderful ways, but also create new challenges. And this was going to be an absolutely critical thing that human beings would absolutely ensure human beings remain central and benefit from all of those changes. And imagine, like, even when I'm first having this conversation, I'm like, wait, what's artificial intelligence? Like, ChatGPT hadn't quite dropped yet, but it was through the conversation. Honestly, it was the ambition. I've never been around such ambitious conversations and the sincerity of the ambition. And so if you hold that and start from there, so this is literally being created to ensure every human has a voice, a place, and an opportunity to benefit. That's a pretty powerful and fundamental thing. It is using technologies because of the moment. We might be able to create something that's never been possible before, something I became very enamored of early. And, when we talk about the brand name world, every massive, I'm going to use the word movement, but I'm going to say movement. Every massive movement or change in the world has usually had an other to push against. Whether that is a technological shift, a religious shift, a nation's rising and falling, it's always, you're welcome as long as you believe in this God, as long as you were born on this soil. The human beings have always created an other to help create this unity. And this was maybe the first time that all you needed to be fundamentally was a human being. There's literally no other criteria. As a human being, you have a place, a right, and value. And I think starting from that sincere place and that sincere ambition and hope then allows everything else to come out of it. There's a lot of explaining to do. The technology is complex. The world is changing rapidly. First, you'll even have to explain artificial intelligence, and that's actually becoming less important, to be honest. I will say at the beginning, that was very important, but I think the world and society is starting to feel it and understand, okay, there's a big shift happening, and I'm starting to notice this in my experiences. But again, coming from the intention, what is the true intention of this project and this network? And starting from there, I think everything else can come out of that. And so that's what we're trying to do.
I want to put my cynics hat on for a second and just say like that. But I'll first acknowledge that I feel like the need for this predates, all the AI hype and the impact of AI. The need for, digital security, digital identity, theft. These are all issues. And you guys touch on this in some of your brand work to kind of draw the threads from the current or older to where things are going.
Yes.
I'll get into that later. I know some of my initial thought around this was a little like the pyromaniac selling the fire hydrants or hyping fire hydrants in a way where, this is not really my view, but I could see how people could make this connection when you have a obviously leader in this field in Sam leading a lot of the development of that technology, which now the world is trying to protect us in a way of where that goes. How do you think about that challenge where it's kind of like we're introducing it, we've introduced the technology. Oh, now here's something to help you protect you against it in a way. That's an interesting dynamic. And particularly and this is a brand podcast, so like from a brand challenge perspective and from a brand communication perspective, how do you think about that? And then how do you address something like that? Is that fair?
Yeah, it's very fair, of course. In fact,
okay.
Jeff, I think the world should be cynical. I think the world has earned their cynicism around technologies, around promises, around newness. I think coming in, obviously I would prefer curiosity, but I think cynicism is also fine. And that forces questions. And when you're building something you believe in and is able to withstand the poking, then I think this can be a very powerful and positive thing, actually, the questions and the questioning. What I would say, number one, I understand that line of logic, of course, especially because Sam has become such a leading figure in the development of artificial intelligence and a voice.
For sure.
One of the, if not the leading voice in what's being created and where it's headed. I would say two things. One, remember, this is also his idea, though. Seeing this, he and Alex seeing this years ago, seeing where they thought it might be headed, and that this was going to be absolutely foundationally necessary, an important element to ensure that it all works together and the human beings benefit. This was being developed that way. Another way that I'm going to give you, since we're on a brand podcast, like I used to work on Volvo. Obviously, it creates beautiful cars. I think it's a beautiful brand. They also develop big metal machines that hurtle the human body down highways at dangerous speeds.
This is a fair comparison.
And what they did was develop a seatbelt to ensure, okay, these are beautiful cars. You can have great experiences, but I want to make sure that you are secure and have a place. And they developed seatbelt, and they did the same. It's actually really good comparison. Then they open sourced it. They developed it, and they didn't patent it and then say, oh, we got something, let's own it. Remember, this is open source. This isn't created then just for OpenAI, for example, at all. This is an absolutely open source project and network. It's not a perfect comparison, but it's a pretty clear one.
I like it. Yeah, that's a good one. You guys have done work in a number of countries, speaking of world, and that insanely ambitious, but obvious goal of getting every single human verified and or authenticated.
Yeah, that's the demographic. People.
Well, yeah, I was going to say, speaking of like marketer dreams and nightmares,
yeah,
that's certainly one of them. But, you've had some fun ads in Indonesia, Argentina, and the US. I wrote about, like we mentioned earlier, the Human and You Know It work that broke in the US last month.
Yeah.
Fun stuff. I also love the piece of, and I don't even know if it has a name, but there's like a clip of Marlon Brando in the West. There's like the floating horse. Was that from the Appaloosa, the 1966 film? Was that a clip? I feel it feels like it was from.
I think it's One-Eyed Jacks.
One-Eyed Jacks. Okay.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
That is a funny, kooky spot, which I think between those two, and certainly so there's also for those who haven't seen it, in Argentina, you guys created a piece around an older gentleman who also just happens to be named Lionel Messi.
Yes.
And that idea of him being authenticated as himself and not obviously the world's greatest football player.
Yes.
There was a piece of captcha work where you guys created like this, I mean, it was kind of fun, hilariously simple. These like giant-sized captcha that looks like the captchas that pop up on your screen, but like setting it in front of a car and say, click all the boxes that have a car in it, and fun stuff. And I love that.
Thank you.
You're clearly establishing a tone, a vibe.
Yes.
But I think is fun, but serious on the need and the tech side, but fun on the messaging side, which is an interesting tightrope to walk.
Yes.
This clearly could be a little bit more like insurance advertising or serious topics, because it is a serious topic.
It is.
But you guys have done this in a way that, yeah, again, you're walking that tightrope of engaging kind of fun stuff on a serious topic. What led you to that balance?
Okay, I will say, I'm going to answer two things. You talked about being in different countries, launching in different countries, and then the tone. So, and the way we're developing work is, again, this is an open source protocol. This is an open source brand. And I really believe the brand needs to be built from the ground up in the communities that it exists. So when we're in Argentina, it should feel like it's coming. Obviously, the insight needs to be human and universal. So if it pops, everybody around the world can understand it, but it needs to look and feel Argentinian. And if we do something in Mexico, like we did with the wrestler with Mystico, it needs to feel like it's coming from Mexico, et cetera. So that is why we've actually started, I've been lucky enough to work on a lot of global brands, and sometimes they're developed centrally and then you kind of adapt it. This has come from the country itself, ground up, working with local teams and building it that way. That has at least been the approach and the reason we approached it that way. And then when it comes to tone, I'll be honest, I wrestled around with it early on. We have a I feel very lucky. I'm surrounded by like really bright people. I'm surrounded by physicists and economists and developers who deeply care about this thing that we're creating, deeply believe in the importance. And I also enjoy even work that is sincere and is, be quite emotional. But my feeling is that we need a sense of lightness, and that what is right for a human brand that is the real human network is that it reflects humanity. And I think human beings are funny, they're confusing, they're silly, they can be sincere, like watch out. You're going to probably see one of those come in, but it allows for a range of emotion, but the tone needs to continue to feel relatable. Oh, I think if I would put the tone through all of those is it's human and relatable. There's a charm. I don't think anything's like hilarious, although it could be.
It's not over the top, goofy.
Exactly. It's not over the top goofy, although I wouldn't be against that if it felt right for the idea and the thing we're talking about. I think it allows people to hear it and accept it instead of, like you said, this could almost feel like homework. We could almost be like, this is what's happening. This is why it's important. This is why you need to participate. And I don't think you're trying to reach the entire world. That really is the demographic. I think humanity, charm, wit allows people to hear it and accept it and kind of take in some of the message. Something else I'll tell you that is very unique about this project. We have no data. We have no data. Remember, like foundational to this entire project is that there is no data. You own everything. Unlike other situations where it's the platform, you can sign in using different platforms, but they have data and that's how they know it's you. This one, you own it. And that's obviously foundational to what the whole project is. So we don't have it even if we wanted it. So there isn't like, it's going to have to be storytelling, creativity, and sometimes attention-getting spectacle that has people noticing it, talking about it, and hearing about it, which is obviously different than the way a lot of brands operate right now.
Yeah, for sure. But something that is, well, at least the smart ones, in my opinion, speaking of your idea of working with local teams and local collaborators on the brand work to make sure it's speaking to that audience. When it comes to humor, when it comes to a more serious message, nuance matters across different countries and audiences. And that's definitely going to be on your side if you're working with those local teams.
That's exactly right. We try to have a very simple approach to briefs, a very simple approach to the brand. Always try to make sure that it is a universal truth, but that it comes to life in a way that feels unique to that community or that country. Or so far, that's been working.
Yeah. Well, speaking of working, I was going to say, what have been the results or responses so far? I mean, a lot of the work's from 25. The U.S. work is barely a month old.
Yes.
What's been the responses? Any surprises in terms of responses in whether it's various places around the world or just like you said, you struggled with that vibe balance, that tone. What's been the results and response so far?
One of the big indicators that we try to pay attention to is sentiment. Are people aware? Again, we're trying to introduce a whole new category, a whole new thing, or people, and just breaking through and getting awareness is key. But just how do people feel about the brand? And to your point, there's a lot of reason to be cynical. I think most people, no matter how you feel in this moment of technology, there's going to be some anxiety. I think no matter how excited you are, there's going to be some anxiety and distrust around it. So how do people feel when they think about the brand? It just becomes very important. And we've seen a great rise in that, where we have run work or we've done activities or activations. That is one of the things that we see great rises in. We've had a few things that have also really just popped and kind of ripped through culture or created long lines and things like that, which has been fun and exciting. But I think the overall, if our goal is awareness, have people understand this exists, understand it's available, and that they, sometimes it's like simple. They like it. Oh, I like that brand. Oh, I've heard of that and I like it. I'm curious. I'm curious enough to learn more. And as you said, and then we have like tremendous amounts of information and we've got endless blogs and we've got a 150-page white paper if you want to dive deep. There's all the information available. He said everything's open source. If you're someone that wants to get into the code, can dig in there. But you have to just start with the classic mind share and sentiment. And we have had success with that when we're places that we've run work.
I like that trajectory of this is me, focus group of one, but like the idea of you're starting with a lighter tone. It's almost like meeting someone at a party and they're not going to jump into the most serious part of their life right away in that conversation.
Hopefully not.
But you get to know them a little bit, even.
Yes.
Half hour into that conversation, you may be going from talking about a TV show to your kids.
Yes.
And then challenges, you know what I mean? So that the trajectory of a normal conversation, not that brands are people, but they're definitely talking to people, that you start a little lighter and then you're able to build a little bit of a rapport to then get into whether it's a white paper or, more serious tone later on. People already know that you have the lighter tone in you and as a part of that brand, which is an interesting kind of as much as we have relationships with brands, I hesitate to use that word, but we do. To me, that's a smart trajectory to take. That order is, as opposed to your point about homework.
Yeah.
Tougher to go the other way.
That's right.
To like start serious and then get light later. That's a little weird.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I think meeting people where they're at and making sure that they have access to where they're at. So like you said, if we're just meeting, all right, you seem fun. You seem interesting, you seem fun, and actually you're here to benefit humans. I'm a human, that sounds good. I can, all right,
right.
That's cool. That's good, I like this. And then depending on where you're at and your need for deeper technical, you can go to like a mid-level. Oh, I get kind of a high-level understanding of how it works, how I can participate. And then if you're somebody who wants to go very deep, we've got very deep writing and information out there and have very deep exchanges with people that need that as well. And again, like we are founded and built around a lot of very deep thinkers. It's one of the things I really enjoy about the group I work with. And so there is a lot of deep thinking and deep writing and paper writing and kind of thesis writing that's available for anyone that wants it.
Nice. We've touched on the role of trust, and whether it's that openness, whether it's the tone of the brand, the ability to build it with an audience, that's important and maintain it for any brand, really. But it feels particularly crucial and frankly challenging in the realm of AI.
Yes.
Right now. When we spoke back in June about the US work, in the US, you guys worked with the ad agency BBDO. Executive Creative Director Jim Lasser was also on the call, and who you worked with on it. And I loved, he had a really good, refreshingly, not that people aren't honest, but refreshingly kind of frank response to one of my questions, and around how you started thinking about whether it was, using the creative work to build trust. And he said, it was a challenge. I'm not going to lie. I told my wife, I think this is the weirdest thing I've ever worked on. Yes. It took a lot of unpacking. First, you have to understand the technology, and then you have to believe. You have to put your cynicism aside, which you're naturally going to have, and really look at what this could do for humans. And I thought that was like a really, when we think of about like that natural cynicism, which of course, I think started our conversation here on, anyone outside your walls and probably some inside, like the healthy amount whenever something new's happening is going to have. How do you think about, like, you're talking to Jim about the work, you're talking to these partners and stakeholders in the various countries, the local partners. How do you think about this strategy when it comes to that building and maintaining trust? Because it's an always fluctuating thing. I mean, anytime something pops in the news around something around AI, the world is going to be impacted. People's enthusiasm / willingness to be authenticated, to trust the platform and the protocol is impacted. So how do you think about it? We've touched on some of this, but like, how do you think about that? I just thought that Jim's answer was so good as someone who's even working on the brand.
Of course. And
you've been clear here, like, because there's a traditional brand side of every brand needs to build some modicum of trust, but like the stakes seem particularly high on here as opposed to, say, a sneaker or a beer.
Yes. Yeah, a little bit. Okay, I would say...
Maybe that's just me, but that's what it seems like.
Yeah, no, I think it's fair. I would say one, again, being clear on the intention.
Okay.
Clarity of intention, I think this is important for every brand, but being very clear on what is the intention of this is the start. 2 is consistency. If we are saying that we stand for privacy, you say it often and you prove it. You show it. 3 would be behavior. Are we behaving ways? Are we behaving transparently? Are we open to questions and pushback? And then 4 is honestly like it's open source. You can look for yourself. I think we're building, the term in crypto is trustless. You want to be trustless, that people, no one has to trust you. You just go and look. It's in the code. They can go through the system and say, okay, that you are what you say you are. And what will, the ultimate goal of this, again, as I said, there's nothing traditional about this. It's an open source protocol. It is also ultimately, the ultimate goal is for full decentralized protocol, which means any one contributor could go away and it doesn't matter. So tools for humanity, we need to reach a point where tools for humanity could disappear and that does not impact the protocol itself because it's a self-sustaining, vibrant community. And to create that means everything has to be open source. Everyone has to be able to get in there and build on it and create with it what they're going to create. We have a unique combination of opportunities to build the trust, but also, trust is built over time. As I said, the world has earned their cynicism, and it's going to take time. That's not on people, that's on us through messaging, behavior, and how we're operating in the world.
I like that, skewing stronger towards show than tell.
Yes.
Going back to my initial, let's say confusion, but around what this is and what you want people to do. There's now, I believe currently, or they're going to be retail locations or places, basically.
Oh, yeah.
So say, okay, someone's listening to this and they're like, John, I'm in. I've taken off my cynicism hat and I want to go get my face scanned.
Yes.
When I read retail spots, it's just a split space to go engage with the orb, and that's essentially it. It's like the bank, almost, not quite. To go back to our financial metaphor, but that's what these are.
Correct.
Okay, so with that in mind, because they're relatively new, I believe, in a good handful of cities around the world, where do we go from here? The U.S. campaign launched last month or in June. This back half of 2025, where do your goals go from here? Is it driving people to these locations and anywhere online? Or where do we go from here?
Speaking to the spaces, that is part of the next phase of our growth. It's been actually today is 2 years since launch. It's the 2-year anniversary of the launch. We're at
nice.
14 million people. 14 million people have verified their World ID. There's 30 million people on the World app. So we're still quite early for what the ultimate goal is, but it's starting to happen. We're starting to reach a level of maturity. So this next chapter, this next phase is definitely about scale, about getting more and more orbs available, getting more spaces open. We're going to use those spaces. Like retail, I've never used that word. Some of us, because there's nothing to buy. There's nothing for sale.
Right. That's what confused me. What are they doing? Orb t-shirts?
Yeah, exactly. But it's the place you can go and learn, if you're curious, learn more about it, and a place that you can verify. I believe we're still at the awareness and curiosity in many places. Now, in some countries, we've got real density, and so that will have different strategies. But in a place like the US, we're just starting. We're just in just a few cities. We've just launched. We're trying to just make people aware, and we're winning if they're curious. Something that has been true so far is that the more people learn about it and understand it, the more they are interested and the more they start to believe it. That is a good turn. Not every product has that or every service has that. But with all the complexity and the fear that can surround these things, that is one thing that we found. Just being curious, learning more has always been a good thing.
Thank you. John, this is fascinating, will continue to be fascinating. I imagine in the next 6 months, there will be more work to come out, and it'll be interesting to see how much of your all of humanity demographic are getting involved. You guys are already at numbers where most brands would be covered in flop sweats of excitement to be at, but you guys are we've got a long way to go for the entire planet.
Yes.
But best of luck. Thanks so much for talking to me today.
Jeff, thanks so much. I always enjoy talking. I really appreciate being on, man.
That's all for today's episode. Brand New World is part of the Fast Company Podcast Network. Our producers are Hawa Otori and Avery Miles. Editing by Blake Odom. Mix and sound design by Nicholas Torres. Our executive producer is Josh Christensen. Be sure to subscribe to Brand New World on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. If you like this podcast, leave us a rating and review on your podcast app of choice, or let us know in the comments of Fast Company's social media. We're basically on every app you can think of. Hey, see you next month.